and welcome to another episode of FtLoC, number 26, I've been reliably told. I'm joined, as usual, by my FtLoC friend, Mr. Henry Catchpole.
Hello, Drew Stern.
Yes, and I am indeed Drew Stern. And we have another ram-packed episode talking about all the great films we've been working on still to come, the ones that are already up on the site, and talking about some things that have been happening in the news. And if you stick around to the end, by popular demand from last week's episode, or 2 weeks ago, if you followed it, where we had some random chat at the end of some interesting topics. We're going to keep that going, and the topic of discussion is our watches. So, if
there might be other stuff in there as well.
There may be some other things.
It might not just be watches.
It might not just be watches, but that was one thing. And there's already a clue somewhere on screen if you look really closely. Anyway, how have you been?
All right, thank you very much. I literally, as you said that, I was like, where is this random clue? I've now clocked where it is.
Spotted it.
Which I'm trying not to look at it now, obviously, because... Wow. Yes, I'm all right. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice to be back in the country again for a bit. And,
you've been travelling again. We'll kind of take off all the things that you've been doing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, should we start with that actually for kind of one of the films that we've got upcoming, which will probably be out by the time this goes live. Actually,
are you referring to Alpine?
I am. Yes.
Okay. Well, yes.
Let's dive straight in with that.
The Alpine A110 S. People might already be familiar, obviously, with the Alpine A110, which surfaced year and a half ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we've got a couple of films of it on the site, including a great film review teaching us how to do Scandinavian flick. Highly recommended. We'll put a link to that in the description. But the S.
Yes.
So tell us all about the S. What can people hopefully will have already seen the film, which will hopefully, fingers crossed, be out. It's not quite done yet. But what can they expect from that car? Why should they check out the film?
So you should check out the film for two reasons, really. I mean, obviously the car is interesting because it's their second version. You kind of think, how can they have improved upon the original? And that's the kind of question that we pose in it.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of a track sort of focused one. It's sort of better on track, more mid-corner adjustable, precise, all those sort of things, because they've stiffened the anti-roll bars and the springs and things like that, lower the ride height. But I think actually the main reason for watching the film, in a way, in fact, is the place that we go to in the second half of the film, the road that we found. When I knew we were going to Portugal, and Alpine very kindly gave us an extra day on top of everyone else to go and
thank you very much for that, Alpine.
Create a better film, which
makes all the difference.
Absolutely does. So we were left to our own devices and headed off. And I did my usual thing of trying to find a good road sort of near Estoril. And I found one not really near Estoril, but it looked sufficiently good on Google Maps and stuff. The pictures I could find that I thought we have to go here.
And you'd never been there before?
Never been there before.
Which is interesting because whether you know this or not, if you follow our channel or other automotive channels, you might be aware of the fact that we traveled to Portugal a lot. Last couple of years, kind of trips there have been increasing, so it feels like a place, if you had explored all roads, that would be the place. But you genuinely found not only a road that you hadn't driven before, one that you perhaps wish you had driven before.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is, I've been to a lot of, you say, really good roads. I've looked up roads all over the world and stuff, and it always staggers me that how many good pieces of road there are out there. And a lot of the time it is because, yes, we've been to Estoril before, but we don't necessarily get the chance to explore much beyond the bounds, or sort of, maybe an hour sort of outside some of the places that we get to go to. So, it's called the Serra da Estrela, or Mountain Range of the Stars, basically is how it roughly translates, and it's actually the highest point in mainland Portugal. So there's a place in the Azores that is higher, so that's technically Portugal as well, but actual mainland Portugal, highest point, and it is just incredible. It was amazing. The road that goes up it is well surfaced and white line down the middle, so it's not sort of some goat track that you're struggling to get up the side of it. We went up there. So we were up there at sunset and dawn when we were doing the filming.
That's how long it takes to make our films, boys and girls. It's an all-day affair.
It really is, and we were filming at the hotel after it got dark as well. But it was just, and that is one of the things as well, going there at that time of day, yes, we've got to drag ourselves out of bed, and we're sort of forced into it because we want the good light, but it is the best time to go, and it's extraordinary. It's just, as you'll see from the film, I was taking photos that straight out of the camera. It looks like I've put some glorious filter or spent hours in Photoshop making it look wonderful, and it just wasn't. That is exactly how it looks. Also, weirdly, at the top, which we didn't include in the film because we were kind of pushed for time, and how do you include a cheese shop in a film. I mean, we include some random stuff, but cheese. So they make cheese on this mountain from the goats and whatever, the sheep that are up there.
Yeah.
And it was sort of bizarre because it was like a market, but with identical stalls in it. So there were half a dozen of these sort of
that sold the same things.
All sold exactly the same trinkets and the same cheese in there, and delicious cheese. And as you walked in through the door, so it's like a mini supermarket on the top of this sort of like 2,000 meters up there, and there were these. You can
was
see
there a village nearby?
No village.
Was it for
really
tourists?
nearby? Sort of. I was kind of. It wasn't that far from civilization, but it was far enough that it was a bit sort of. And there were these observatories there, these big sort of golf ball type things on that sort of looked a bit like big microphones actually. But yeah, it was just up there for tourists really, and you could park literally at the highest point, and it was bizarre. So I wandered in and had some cheese.
So the A110 kind of fell into that fell into that category of car, and we'll come back to the roads in just a second. But I just wanted to ask you this: as a car that kind of goes against this kind of top trumps, always going for the fastest, most accelerating, and just went for a brilliant package.
Yeah.
And from your review of and what a lot of other people had to say about the A110, that much like how the GT86 was kind of in that mold of just like, we just want to make a great car that's not crazy expensive, fun to drive, just really balanced.
Yep.
Does this make it more balanced, or does it make it more focused in any particular direction? How does it sway that? Because it felt like it was already quite a solid package. So why would you opt for this?
So, well, if it was me, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
is the straight up answer, because it's definitely everything. You get away from some of that roll, mainly is the big thing, and you take out some of the sort of pliancy in the suspension. So as I say, it feels perhaps better on track because it's more incisive and it's sort of more easily adjustable mid corner. But I think a big part of the package, the original package, this shows how right they got the original package basically. Yeah. You can see why they've done it, because they've given it a bit more power, and you're kind of like, well, what else do we do to this car? Sort of, and they presumably, I suspect, didn't have a huge amount of budget, small company, etc.
Yeah.
So it's quite an easy way, in a way, of some suspension changes. I'm not belittling sort of the amount of work that goes into making suspension changes like that and still making the car ride and all that. But in the big scheme of things, they haven't had to slap a big rear wing on it or a big splitter or all these sort of things. So. And it's only £5,000 more than the Legend, the similarly spec'd standard A110. So even they're not saying it's a big leap on in that respect. And they said as well, we're not saying this is better. It's just a different flavour of A110, which I think is quite telling. Really, they're not sort of. They almost know that
they got it right. Yeah,
they got it right. What can we do to this car? We think we've produced the best car from the get-go, which is, I think, really quite refreshing. It's really nice. It's not sort of we've kept a lot back, or we've kind of sort of, this is the one you really want, and sort of, look, suckers, you bought that one, but now here's one that's even better.
It does feel like that often.
Yeah, it can feel like that. And I think, this is quite a genuinely really nice thing that they've gone, no, actually, that's what we really wanted, but we accept that some people, if you're going to lots of track days, you're that sort of person, then perhaps this one will answer some criticisms you had, and plus you get a bit more power into the bargain, although no more torque. So again, on the road, doesn't really make a massive difference, I don't think, the extra power. So
okay, well, full details about the car, the A110 S in the film, and those pictures of that spectacular road. I wanted to come back to that though. What to you, Henry Catchpole, makes a great road? Because obviously it can look nice and it can be in a nice environment, which is an element and a dimension to it. But from a driving perspective, what, once you've driven it, are the characteristics that make you say, that was a great driving road?
Wow. I'd just like to point out that you didn't ask me this before. So right, okay.
I've just sprung that on you. Because you can look at a twisty piece of road, like from a satellite, like on Google Maps or something, and then drive it and then come away going, yeah, it was fine. But then other times you drive a piece of road and it might not even be in the most scenic of environments, but you're like, that was fun.
Yeah. And I suppose there's an element to what I look for in a road, obviously, when I know we're going to go and film somewhere or photograph somewhere, whatever, that I know what Charlie and George will need. So in terms of sight lines, not hedges along either side, sort of that sort of thing. Plus, if we can find spectacular views and sort of an easy turnaround point stuff, things like that, sometimes it really, that can make a good road for us, as well as being, and which will look great on film, as well as being hopefully a good road to drive.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual driving, obviously being wide enough is fairly crucial for obviously an awful lot of cars, particularly these days. Not actually the Alpine, because it's nice and small and diminutive and well packaged, but this was a road big enough to have taken a bigger car. I think a mixture of corners, certainly. You look at something like the Stelvio, and it's pretty much hairpin after hairpin after hairpin, and that's really not the most interesting thing to have. Most of the time, in actual fact, if you look at sort of Google Maps, you might not pick out the best road, because you look at one that sort of goes zigzaggy all the way, and you sort of hope that
it looks spectacular to observe, but not necessarily to drive.
Doesn't mean it won't be, because sometimes again there are nuances there. Being from the UK, I think I like the bumpier roads of, say, Wales or Scotland, because I think it adds an extra element to testing the car and actually sort of feeling the car move underneath you. And I think it does actually show off a car frequently. In depends on the car, obviously, but really good car in adds another dimension to it. But I think the scenery for me as well is still a really important thing, because I think it, the idea that cars transport you to extraordinary places, and that these roads are frequently masterpieces of engineering, the fact that they've gone up a mountain or whatever, and gone round a particular aircraft, there is something genuinely really uplifting, sort of, makes you feel good looking at a lovely piece of road with a lovely view. It's just the car in that setting is quite a big part of it, I think.
That's the kind of thing that makes roads like the PCH work, the California Pacific Coast Highway, which is a boring road in of itself, but the views are so spectacular. And then we spoke about this in the last FtLoC, where you drove the Chiron most recently. And I've driven it, but in some crappy rental cars. Yeah. But it's still a great experience, because you're seeing...
Absolutely.
It is a fair point that not just the kind of the thrill of the drive, but the scenery can make a huge difference. Yeah. And we'll probably explore that in a future episode of FtLoC. Sure. We'll go into that in a little bit more depth.
Think about it.
Yeah. And we'll probably ask you the question, not necessarily about what the best driving road is, but we might go for generalities, like which country has the best driving roads, because there's a lot of debate around that. Yeah. That film, the A110 S, should be on YouTube right now, he says, with his fingers crossed. If it's not, it will be on very, very soon. We have had a lot of great content. We're getting to some of the last pieces of content that you guys shot out in California.
Yeah, we've still got quite a bit more from that. Yeah.
We're getting through it. And I wanted to talk to you about Workshop 5001.
Ah, yes.
Many of you will be familiar with Singer, the company that reimagines Porsche 911s. Mm-hmm. You might not necessarily be as familiar with Workshop 5001, who do something similar. I think it's fair to say it's in the same ballpark, or would you say that I'm incorrect in saying that?
No, I mean it is obviously broadly the same ballpark. They take a 911.
They would both describe as hot rodding 911s.
Yeah, but they really are sufficiently different cars. I mean, you can totally understand that if you're a very wealthy collector of cars, then you could see a reason for having both in your dream garage. Absolutely.
Really that much of a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they really felt, and I drove them back to back. So in terms of, I drove Workshop 5001 one day, and then it was Singer the following day, and they feel very different. The Singer is much smoother, sort of a more, almost more everyday car, if that makes sense. Whereas the Workshop 5001 is much rawer, and it's a more bespoke build in many respects as well, because the Singers are generally, they're all got the same.
Well, paired back to what they actually are, Singer reimagines 964 911s, 964 generation 911s with the original engine, but they have it messed with by.
Oh,
It was Cosworth, but it's now Williams.
Well, Williams is going to be DLS, so it's still Cosworth, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think?
Okay. But it's a much more modern car, whereas
and it has gunfire bodywork and all that sort of thing.
the Workshop 5001 is based on a 1972.
Yeah, I mean,
911.
like I say, it's much more bespoke. So this is the fourth one he's done, and they've all been slightly different. So and not all based off such early cars, in fact. And it's much more a case of a client coming to them and building a project from the ground up as to what do we want to do this with, sort of what gearbox are we going to put in it, sort of where's the engine come from. It's all so Marlon used to work at Singer back in the early days of them, and then went off for whatever reason and set up on his own, and he used to do a lot with the engines. He has a lot to do with why the Singer engines, certainly early ones, were the way they were, and it's they just feel completely different, the cars. As I say, it's a much earlier car, the Workshop 5001 that I drove. A lot of people, obviously, I know you're going to bring it up, the price.
Yes, it's in the headline of the actual video itself. This particular car has a price tag of $1 million, which is 2 to 3 times as much as the kind of average 911 as reimagined by Singer has cost customers.
No, I mean, Singer's now well north of
500,000.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think when we first did a film on them, which was back in 2014, I think they were looking around 350 to 400,000, but we're still talking significantly higher.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of your comments in the video have been around that, kind of saying this is preposterous for it. There are lots of companies that do these handmade cars with huge price tags. Icon, Jonathan Ward's company, Icon, out of not too far away actually, down in Southern California as well, does the bespoke. Their BR, the Broncos, their Land Cruisers, and they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. But I think the what Marlon tries to bring across is that it costs this much because the customer wanted it. Not wanted it to cost that much, but wanted the best, the absolute best.
And it's things like all the stuff that's gone into the engine is not, and it's not necessarily off the shelf parts. It's all been then bespoke to that car, and the setup of the car, and there's a certain. You said he charges X markup on the parts. So if you're buying the best parts plus markup, and then it's a straightforward labour rate, and that's in terms of what it costs to build a car like that and to develop it, and sort of, and it's not it makes Singer look like a production line to that extent when you sort of go and they've got
that's a bold claim because those cars, if you look at it, it's such a small workshop.
It's not to but they have a sort of a blueprint for their cars, and yes, each one is different, and it's really a again, everybody chooses their own design of Singer and how they want the colours to be, and
Porsche
things
911
like that.
as reimagined by Singer.
Yes, absolutely. But then this is the next level in terms of it's just that car, and it's you're talking different wheel sizes and different sort of, and how that engine is going to be compared to another one. It's the interior, the suspension set. Yeah, it's a bespoke.
And to have driven both relatively back to back is incredibly rare for anyone to have had the chance to do it. You're probably one of an extremely small amount of people, especially someone who's not in a position to buy either of them, to have driven both of them that quickly back to back. You say they are completely different in terms of what they offer the driver as an experience of driving, or just as what they are as a car. Yeah. So if you had $1 million plus in your pocket, or way more, and you were considering burning it on either one of these, what kind of person or for what reason would you pick one or the other?
I'm going to reserve that until our Singer road review film has come out, because I don't want to prefigure that. So we can come back. Let's come back to that. After we've done that, because I think it's unfair to kind of, until we've done our Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer film road review, because we've got the one of the track laps with Marino, that's gone up. But let's save it for that, I think. Is that fair enough?
We're leaving you hanging.
I'm sorry.
But for now, you can check out Workshop 5001. If you haven't heard of them, you should. The car itself is absolutely spectacular. And is it worth $1 million? Well, have a look on the film, and
if somebody's willing to pay it, then it's worth $1 million, isn't it? That's the thing as well.
It's what you're willing to pay. Yeah.
If somebody can see the value in it or wants that bespoke treatment to a car, then yeah.
Yeah.
Once it gets to a certain point, I always feel from my perspective, it's all fantasy land as far as I'm concerned in terms of buying.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the cut-off point is. Is it £200,000? Is it sort of above that? But it gets to a point where, as I say, it's what somebody figures it's, that particular customer base figures it's worth.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, is it my job to say, yes, it's worth $1 million? Because it's sort of, objectively, almost nothing you start to look at. The Pagani's at 3 point whatever it was million that we've got the video of that up there as well, the new Wara BC Roadster.
Yes.
It's phenomenally expensive.
Yeah.
It's almost the sort of from my job at that point is to get into a car like that and just let you, the viewer, know how it feels. Does it put a grin on my face? Doesn't it? Which Workshop 5001 certainly did, and tell you what the experience is like, because this is not a hot hatch. This is not a Fiesta ST where I can say this is really good value for money, because what are you comparing it to? There's no rivals really. It's just I mean, does it do something different? And
if we're brutally honest, if this car cost half as much, you still couldn't buy it. I mean, you, as in me, as in you. It doesn't matter. It could cost a third of that, and it's still out of reach. So it does get. As soon as it's north of 150,000, it's complete fantasy. Anything below there, it's probably still a bit of a fantasy. But yeah, it is. It's not like art though, where it's a painting where the actual labor into it, if you quantified that in human hours, would be nowhere near as much as what it could potentially reach at a cost. There is human labor, and it's taken a while to build the skills to be able to figure out how to take the engine and change its displacement.
Know where to source the parts, understand what sort of...
And all handmade, so there's a lot of labor. But the only way for you to be able to give an educated opinion about it is to watch the film. Links in the description below.
Two films, actually.
Two films. One is an extended interview with Marlon, the proprietor of Workshop 5001, and he goes into a lot more detail. They both work very well together. I admit I'd watch the review film first because you get the benefit of Henry's opinions about the car and some of the highlights from the interview, but the extended interview, very, very interesting. Really quickly, you picked up on the Pagani film where you got to see the Huayra BC was that at the Quail?
That was at the Quail, yes.
The Quail at Monterey Car Week a couple of months ago. But for me, more interestingly, you actually go back and take a walk down memory lane with 20 years of Paganis going all the way back to the original Zonda.
Yeah, it was all through the Zondas, so yeah.
Is very much worthwhile. It's kind of like one of those dummies guides books where, I'm sure you knew all this stuff anyway, but just a great refresher on everything Pagani related. I'm doing this with my hands again, I've realized. Get you up to speed on the entire history of Pagani in a very short amount of time. Very much worth watching. Wanted to talk about one more film that came out recently, Vantage AMR manual gearbox.
Which I think we talked about last time, and I had to I can't possibly say what it's like.
Exactly, but now it's out. So, how was it? You can watch the film and see exactly what Henry thought, but specifically, Aston Martin is one of the last companies to still regularly, with that kind of tier of car, still offer a manual gearbox. Was one of the last to offer a V12 with a manual gearbox. So, the Vantage with a manual gearbox, is it still a relevant way of putting that car together? Is it in the same way that Porsche's GT cars that now come again with a manual gearbox, that really worthwhile addition? Do you think it's important that Aston Martin specifically still offer a manual option on that car?
Yeah, I think so. It's of all the cars they produce, I think it's the one that makes the most sense to have a manual gearbox in, really. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Because it's the sports car. That's the one. And a few people have said, and I completely take the point, that if this had been a few years ago when everybody was still producing a manual gearbox for their sports car, would we have made such a fuss about it? No, we absolutely wouldn't have done. And would people have been more critical of the gearbox? It's more difficult to say. I think people were critical of the 7-speed anyway, because it's the same one that we had in the last generation Vantage, that dogleg 7-speed.
Took me a bit of getting used to driving that one.
Yeah, it really does. But it's all context, isn't it? I suppose, in terms of if you drive it now, and it's lovely just having a manual gearbox, which in the past, and that 7-speed, it was nice spending a full day with it again and sort of getting used to it and its wiles, I suppose. And the pedal placement was something I mentioned in the film, but it really is, impressive when somebody gets it absolutely right. And they've sweated the details on.
You're talking millimeters of placement and just getting it just right.
Just so it feels absolutely, particularly with a box where you know that the actual shift pattern, you want everything else to be right, so you can concentrate on getting that really nice heel and toe downshift, which you don't have to do because you've got the AMR button, which does the automatic blips for you. But you generally don't need it because it's such a nice box to heel and toe with. So yeah, I think I'm glad it exists. It certainly gives that car, I think, more of a USP in that sports car market. You can't buy a Merc with that engine and
weirdly,
a manual gearbox.
But Aston Martin proven that you could.
Yeah,
they've made it work. So
yeah, and perhaps it won't sell very well. I don't know, because perhaps everyone, there's people out there. Perhaps this is a journalist bubble. I don't know, but I don't think it is. I don't think if there wasn't a certain amount of figures to back it up that people want a manual gearbox still out there. I know most people really don't, but
no. Well, hence why they don't get made that much. Supply and demand. You made a really interesting point in the film, which never occurred to me as much when I was struggling with the old Vantage's dogleg 7 gear box. Dogleg gearbox is where first is over and back instead of over and forward, and reverse is over and forward.
Yep.
The benefits being that second and third are above and below each other, the two probably most used on track. Which is great in a 5-speed box, because from neutral position, 2 and 3 are directly from the neutral position forward and back.
Yep.
But now, neutral is between 2 and 4.
Yeah.
So there's a chance of you pushing into fourth easily, surely.
Neutral is between fourth and fifth.
Oh, right.
Now.
So it's literally, from neutral, if you push forward, you're going to fourth instead of into second.
Yeah, it's certainly
it's just not quite as simple.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the springing across the gate that you have to get used to, and it's sort of, I found the trickiest one actually was the third back to second one. So that's and because that's where it was easy,
because you have to put a little bit of pressure, and if you do too much, you'll slip into reverse. Yes,
I mean, it's not that sounds scary. Really, that's not going to happen. What is more likely to happen, in fact, is that you don't put enough pressure and you end up going to fourth rather than second. That's or just even again, it's really not that you'll end up in fourth. You'll just bulk slightly between second and fourth on the sort of, as if it was a
still not good.
Gate, sort of.
Yeah, it's still not ideal coming into a corner.
No,
it's not catastrophic, but not great.
It makes you think, certainly, and that's
especially if you're relying on engine braking and you're all of a sudden going to fourth.
And to that extent, it's not the best manual gearbox, but it's a manual gearbox, and it's still quite interesting and fun. And the actual shift into first wasn't great. That was I don't know, it was just a pre-prod thing, but it certainly would launch or occasionally pop out. So I'm glad you didn't have to use first very much. And to be honest, there's so much torque, you could just use it like a 6-speed really, and always forget about first. But yeah, it's interesting.
Why does it have 7 ratios? Is 7 like an overdrive gear for efficiency, like in an automatic box?
Yeah, as far as I know.
I'm not sure that's worth it for the confusion in the gearbox for that slight extra efficiency at high speeds. But there you go. There's a full film on that.
Actually, isn't it because it's it's simply a mechanical linkage on top of the 7-speed shift box? That's what it is, isn't it?
So it's not a redeveloped box. It's just the robotized manual.
Had the robotized manual came first, and then they.
That makes sense. That does make sense.
So that's
so it's just plain laziness, not developing a new gearbox.
It's what Porsche did with the their manual, 7-speed manual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I never remember
effectively-
having that much difficulty with their 7-speed, but theirs
No, it
wasn't
wasn't
dogleg.
quite- Well, it was sort of dogleg the other way, wasn't it? So in terms of
Yeah.
7 was the dogleg off.
It,
all the way
you could
across
describe
there,
it as
so-
a dogleg, but first was still up,
Yeah, it's not
left,
traditional.
and,
Yeah, yeah.
and forward.
And it was, it still wasn't great. It was certainly felt a bit odd again in that springing between those ones. Talking of which, does sort of bring us on to the news section.
Yes,
if
that's
all right.
that's where I was
Because-
going.
Well, there we
yes.
go. And it brings us on because Porsche has announced a manual gearbox option for the 992. Finally, they said it was coming.
For
didn't
the
they?
Carrera.
No, for the Carrera S and Carrera 4S at
Right,
the moment.
yeah.
That's what.
I mean, as opposed to Turbo or one of
right.
the RS models, yeah.
Yes, yeah, because they haven't been released
Yeah.
yet. So yes, it's the, and I'm sure it will arrive in standard Carrera at some point. But at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, it's being released in the US first because that is the market that most demands a manual gearbox still.
Really?
Yep, absolutely. Which is why BMW produced manual gearboxes for its M5s. E60 M5 got a manual gearbox when we never did in Europe. So-
It would seem surprising that the US, the kind of the country that drove the whole idea of all cars being an automatic, being the biggest. But they're full of car enthusiasts. They love
Yep,
their driving,
absolutely.
so that kind of rings true.
So I think it saves 9 kilos if you get the manual, and it's so I've read it's a no cost option, which seems a bit cheeky because previously I'm sure PDK was a cost option.
Yeah,
So, but I think you get
could be scale of production. Kind
well,
of
you
thing.
get Sport Chrono with bundled in with the manual box, so which gets sport suspension and obviously the Sport Chrono thingamy and the different engine mounts, and you get a mechanical limited slip diff as opposed to the electronically controlled limited slip diff that you get with PDK. So yeah, that's the differences, and be interesting to see what they've done with the shift weighting in it and 7-speed box and all that. So yeah,
Porsche manual gearbox is really fun out on track in traffic with like a super heavy clutch, which is where you would take a kind of a more down the scale Porsche more often. I'm not sure I would option that. If it was a car that I would track, I would. But I've driven manual Porsches in heavy traffic, and it's there's a reason why PDK became so popular. And it wasn't just because it's a good box. But Aston Martin also have some news, which we can talk about. Although I can't talk about it with much authority. I understand that you've looked into it a bit more. But they have
still
produced.
doesn't mean I've got authority on it.
They have produced
motorbike.
a motorcycle. And a very handsome looking motorcycle it is
the,
too.
The AMB 001 by Aston Martin and Brough Superior.
Yes.
So
Is that an impressive name to people who are into bikes?
Brough Superior, yes, it's a name I know of in motorbikes. I sort of say I like motorbikes. I've never ridden them because I promised my mother I wouldn't. And I was doing lots of rallying at the time, and I thought, right, that's what my mother would rather I didn't. I get it. It kind of saves me from myself to some extent. Anyway, yes, I have heard of Brough Superior, and this is a company that produced motorcycles back in the sort of, I think it's 20s and 30s, that it was originally sort of set up. What's it got down here? The SS 100, I think, is the bike that they were sort of famous for. And in fact, Lawrence of Arabia, they trumpet that Lawrence of Arabia had 7 of them. In fact, he had the 8th one on order when he died whilst riding the 7th. They don't tend to mention that quite so much.
It's like anything that he had seems to be, because Rolls Royce tend to bring it up as well, like any connection to Lawrence of Arabia, and it's like, it's he seems to be quite the endorser of products, even the ones he died on.
Yeah, well, so Brough Superior were known as the Rolls Royce of motorbikes back then, and the story is, so it was Brough Superior was set up by George Brough, and his father already manufactured bicycles. So Brough motorcycles in it was Nottingham, I think. Yes, Nottingham, were manufactured by William Brough. Then his son came along, went, I can do that better, so set up Brough Superior. I mean, that's
Wow,
that's a bit cheeky, isn't it? You're going to get clipped around the ear for that sort of,
It's
insolence.
seriously, like.
But anyway, apparently he needs to build them twice. Some of this is off Wikipedia, so I'm sorry if it's. But they used to build them twice. So put them all together, take it all fitted, then take it apart, and then all the parts would be painted or checked or cleaned or whatever, and sort of then put back together again. And they were phenomenally expensive bikes.
Yeah, why would you do that? Why not just build it once?
I don't know.
It's like if you did that with your Lego, you assembled your Lego, go like, yep, that looks good, smash it all up, now I'm building it for real. Put it back together. That seems like a very long boxing day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but there we go. Anyway, the new...
It looks so good though, this bike.
It does look really good. It's track only though.
Yeah.
Track only. I mean, really?
I think
that's annoying.
Is that just because of the aesthetics of where would you put a number plate on it? It didn't look like there was much of a placement for it.
Yeah,
and design was. Is it? Who do we know who designed it? Whether it's
so I think Marek Reichman, who is
yeah.
the head of design at Aston Martin, certainly is quoted in the press release about it, and it has that sort of spine along the top, which is apparently taken from the side strakes in Aston Martins. Normally you get the sort of the behind the front wheel, the side straight there. So that's taking that.
It's bubbled under the DB11 side strakes to create vortices.
Yeah, indeed it is.
Curlicue. Curlicue vortices.
Yeah.
I did a very seductive hand movement in my DB11 film to illustrate that, and I got made fun of mercilessly.
Well, there we go.
But so there are some design touches that come across, because motorbikes don't have that many places to show off the design, but it did feel like, if you had to guess the manufacturer, Aston Martin definitely would come to mind, especially with the newer cars like the Valkyrie and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's obviously sterling green, which immediately brings to mind Aston Martin. It's got a touch from the Valkyrie in terms of the badge, which is on the sort of on the tail. I don't know if it's on the nose as well, but is the sort of the laser etched. It's 9-micron stainless steel, the wing badge, which is then actually under the lacquer. Which is pretty cool, and that's exactly what it will be on the Valkyrie. So it's some incredibly lightweight but real badge. It's not just a sticker or something, which is quite cool. The engine, 180 horsepower, turbocharged V-twin. So all the original, I think all the original. I think there might have been a couple of specials that weren't, but all the originals were V-twins. And this new company as well, Brough Superior, was bought and set up again. When was it? It was. Quite recently, so relaunched in 2013 by Thierry Henriette and a chap in Jersey as well, I think. But
is that like a really small Thierry Henry?
Well, did occur to me, yes. And the bike's going to be built in Toulouse, so not in the UK. Which seems a bit of a shame, but there we are.
Well, I guess if they don't have set up to do bikes, then that makes perfect sense.
There we are. So going to be built out at this Brough Superior factory down in Toulouse. Build 100 of them. 108,000 euros each, including taxes. So,
wow, that's generous. I understand that's very expensive for a bike.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think the the top Ducatis, which are very expensive, they're less than half that.
Yeah. From
what I understand. So.
I think the most expensive electric bikes are still less than that now, and. But, it's one of 100 and it looks spectacular, and I'm sure it goes like stink.
And back in the day, Brough Superiors were known. They were like £100 back in the day when the average wage was yearly wage was £200. So,
Well, we haven't been offered the opportunity to drive one, nor could we if we had.
Well, I think you ride. Do you ride bikes? You don't drive them, do you? I'm not up on this, but
I just got my license to ride a moped. Because I got offered the chance to ride an electric motorcycle, but I needed my my moped license for that, which I now have, and I'm seriously considering getting my bike license. Don't tell my mum or wife.
I won't. I don't think
they don't watch
basis,
this.
So
they don't watch FtLoC. It'll be absolutely fine.
It'd be interesting to know. Actually, let us know if you ride bikes. If you know lots about bikes, let us know what you think about this. Is it just is it the same way I often look at bicycles when manufacturers do tie-ups? And actually, Aston Martin did quite a good tie-up with Stork, and it was a very, very good bike anyway. And they at least reference Stork, and it was a collaboration rather than just a manufacturer sticking their badge on another manufacturer's bike manufacturer's bike, so and charging a premium for what nobody would actually normally, any bike enthusiast would never go and buy it. So let us know. Is it good? Is it bad? Have we missed something? It's carbon fiber body, isn't it?
Yeah. If you do ride bikes and you are particularly good on camera and think you've got what it takes to make it on Carfection, then maybe send us in a show reel, and when it comes time for us to do a review, if we get the chance, we can hit you up. Continuing with the news, Mini Cooper, price announcement for the GP.
Yes, absolutely. So that is going to be about £34,000 in the UK. They're going to build 3,000 of them. I think that's been announced. So previous two generations were 2,000 each, I think, overall. It's going to have 306 horsepower, and it's already done a sub 8-minute lap of the Nordschleife, which is obviously critical.
Yeah.
So we don't really know many other details than that, but the previous two were fun. The second one was really good, actually. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll look forward to getting our hands on that. And another car has broken cover. There is a updated M2 CS.
Absolutely, because I was actually going to say that the trouble is now the McGann Trophy R has made, with its £75,000 price point, has made it basically every other hot hatch instantly sort of the Mini at $34,000. Previously, you might go, that's a bit steep for a Mini, but
it's shifting the goalposts. Yeah,
it's half the price of a McGann Trophy R. So hey, it's
all bets are
therefore
off.
good value. So anyway, talking $75,000, that's the price of the M2 CS that's just been announced with blue paint and gold wheels. Did you notice?
I didn't notice the gold wheels.
I put something on my Instagram this morning at Henry Catchpole. We're at Carfection Films, aren't we? We haven't done the tags yet.
Oh, we haven't.
Look at that! I got it there first.
You did,
once.
yeah. I'm at Drew Stern. I at Drew Stern, spelled STEARNE. I mentioned it in last week's episode, I say last week, it was 2 weeks ago. In the last FtLoC episode, I got a bunch of new followers off the back of it.
There you go. Excellent.
People actually found my account. So I've had a big, I say big spike. I don't have the 20,000 plus followers that you do, but I have a modest few. But yes, Instagram, at Carfection Films is our Instagram tag for Carfection. At Drew Stern, at Henry Catchpole. Anyway, you put a picture of gold wheels up.
Just because, gold wheels, blue paint, gold wheels. I was like, there has to be somebody in BMW that's a late 90s, early noughties rally fan in BMW.
It's a bit Subaru,
it's just, and there's a time, back then, back at the, when I started doing all this, no other manufacturer would have dared to put out a car that had blue paint and gold wheels, because everybody would have just
laughed at them. Yeah,
just gone, well, where are the 555 stickers? So anyway, it still looks really cool. And the various figures for it are 444 brake horsepower, so 40 brake
easy
horsepower
to remember.
Up, because it's the same as the M4 competition as well. No extra torque, so still 405 pounds for the torque. Importantly, it's got a new exhaust, so it's got a redesigned dual branch exhaust system, according to the press pack. What I hope is basically that it makes the car sound better, that S55 engine better than it did in the M2 competition, which kind of sounded okay, but it wasn't great. And I know that engine can sound so much better, because I had the M4 CS afterwards, and it sounded fantastic. So hopefully M2 CS will sound an awful lot better. Driver's pack you can have, which raises the top speed limiter to 174 miles an hour, and you get Cup 2 tyres with it, which would seem like a absolute no-brainer if you're going to buy that car. So, and importantly, DCT or a manual gearbox.
Whee!
So yes, and that's about it. Carbon bonnet. Carbon. I'll say that again. Carbon bonnet, which is about half the weight of the standard bonnet.
Yeah.
And it's got a sort of outlet in it as well, like the M4 CS did. And there's various other carbon bits. It's not actually any lighter overall, I think, the car, because of the various bits. So it's got the adaptive suspension on, but I imagine compared to a similarly spec'd M2 comp, it would be lighter, if that makes sense. So, but not by much by all accounts. So there we are. Should be a pretty cool thing. At £75,000, it's a lot for an M2. It's direct competition with 718 GT4, the Cayman. So
yeah, I know that you were waiting on the competition to kind of rectify a lot of the things that you found wrong with just the standard M2. But me and Charlie were talking about this yesterday, how much we still love just the standard M2 and how brilliant it was. Because I had one of the best track days I've ever spent. We had an M4 GTS, a standard M4, and a standard M2. at the same time on track, and I could have as much time in any of them as I wanted, and I spent my entire day in the M2 after I'd driven a bit in the other cars. M4 GTS is too much car for me, and between the M2 and the M4, the M2 was just in terms of balance and fun was way better.
Yeah, and track was absolutely the right place for that early one as well, because it was a bumpy road. That was where it that's what untied it, as it were, because it was just hard to get into a nice flowing rhythm, which you would be able to do on track with it.
Yeah,
and actually. So this sort of goes back to something we were talking about earlier. I've been thinking, it'd be great to get an early M2, and then in fact you could put a set of Mulgari. We did the film on that, which again was another car, very expensive. People were sort of saying, well, it's 79,000 pounds or whatever it was, and again, development costs. That's the reason something so bespoke costs that amount of money, and you can see the work that's gone into it, and I know the work that they put into setting it all up, and it showed in the suspension. You thought, wow, you get a set of that KW suspension on a second-hand early M2. What a car that would be.
This KW suspension that was in the Workshop 5001 car as well, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So they really do some fantastic stuff. So
get an original M2 and mess with the suspension
and then
a bit.
Suspension, just to give it that plancy, which is what we really wanted from that was the biggest thing we're looking for in the sort of the updated M2 and then the M2 competition. It was that just stability, so it worked better on the road. That's what I was thinking.
I'll keep digging around the classifieds to see if I can find. I think me, Charlie, and George were at like 2 minutes away from just chucking some money in together and seeing what we could get hold of, and then we came to our senses and left it alone.
It's nice having the daydreams, though, isn't it? I love that sort of.
We do that a lot.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I sort of do that, over. Think about a 911. It genuinely sort of something well within reach, or well within. Might be a stretch. Something that I could genuinely think of. So you think of, I don't know, 996. A ratty 996. You're thinking, okay, well,
prices of those are going up though. People are getting over the headlights and they're coming back to them.
Yeah, I know, but not that much. But it's still kind of anyway. Still find ratty ones out there that sort of, and you think, and I can genuinely spend an entire weekend sort of convincing myself that that's the one, and do that, and do that, and then sort of not go and buy it. But I'll have gone through the whole sort of that lovely process of sort of you do all the research and do everything, and then sort of, and that's half the fun, I find anyway. So you sort of almost find that weekend's kind of sort of right. What am I going to imagine I'm going to go out and buy this weekend, and sort of look up whatever it is. So perhaps it'll be an M2 this weekend.
Well, it's the same thrill I used to get as a kid going through the Argos catalogue.
Yeah, exactly. It is exactly that. Yes,
and I could have that. That will make sense to our UK viewers. If you're not from the UK, that will go completely over your head.
Getting your little pen out and
the laminated book of dreams, as Bill Bailey described it.
Exactly.
Google Argos. It's a treasure trove. I had one film I just wanted to quickly touch on that came out since we last spoke, because I went... Bentley Flying Spur, yes. I went to Monaco. It was actually the first time that I'd ever been.
Really?
And I'd never been to Monaco. And I got to stay in the Hotel de Paris in Casino Square, which if you're going to stay in Monaco is the place to be. And we picked up the Flying Spur and drove it around the hills around Monaco.
You went to the Col de Vence, didn't you?
We went to the Col de Vence. Car's great. I think it helps. It really, this generation really separates it more from the Continental design-wise, in the same way that the new Continental looks different than previous generations. The new Flying Spur feels different, as in it separates more. It's still very much the kind of forgotten Bentley. It's the Bentayga is the best selling, and the Continental GT is the most iconic. The Flying Spur is kind of the one in between, but it's a saloon car in a world where saloon cars are becoming more and more rare. So just wanted to highlight that film. I really enjoyed making it. And maybe if you watch it, you can leave a comment about the car. It would be really refreshing.
I've forgotten that.
Because, and it could be interesting just to check out the film for this reason. None of the comments on the YouTube video are about the car. They're all about
you have
what
to scroll a long way down, don't you? Because I came to that film a few days after you'd put it up, and just as you do, always got some comments. Wow, this is extraordinary.
There are
good
three
T-shirts there, by the way.
Yes, thank you very much. There are three main categories of topic of comment on that film. One is about me wearing two watches, which regular viewers will be fully aware that I do, and we'll come on to that a little bit more later. Another is what I was wearing. Was also not very popular with viewers. All of that comes from my regular wardrobe. Wasn't necessarily something I was specifically wearing for that film, just what I regularly wear. And the third was there's a bit where I jump off a little mound.
Oh, yes. I did drag all sorts of sort of hideous mud into the... It really wasn't muddy by the looks of it.
It wasn't muddy at all.
I went back, obviously, and looked at it specifically to
It was a bit dusty, but I was also further away from the car than the shot kind of suggests. That's what we call a classic Henry walk and talk, where you start the film just kind of walking away from the car. And it wasn't even my idea, it was George's idea, because I went off and sat up on that hill while he was filming to be out of his way, and he was like, oh, we could shoot the intro there. I said, oh, and then I could like walk from there to... Like, okay, fine. But
I did think for a minute you were going to do what I'd done in the Aston film.
Which one?
Because there's a bit in the Aston AMR manual film where I sit in the woods as well.
Yeah. Well, you tend to sit in the woods quite a lot. There's quite a few films. You do it in the Bentley Continental GT film in Scotland. That's why we called it a Henry Walk and Talk. It's not just about the walking and talking. It's about.
But there was something a bit different about the Aston one.
Yeah,
which was.
Well, I tried to do that, and all of the comments on the video have been mostly negative about me as a person and my choice. Like, I wouldn't mind if they didn't agree with my opinion about the car, but no one talked about that at all. So that's please go watch it and forget what I'm wearing. Just ignore it.
How is the grille on that car? Because it looks they've got the new sort of very upright slats.
It looks imposing, but it's not. It's because you can also lower the Bentley emblem. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel completely out of place with kind of the modern trend for quite bold grills. So I described it as almost a Q car once you lower the bonnet. So, and in the same way that I think the new Continental GT, the whole design, I think is attractive, but I think I described it as attractive but unremarkable. It's less unique. It's more kind of a good-looking modern car as opposed to like the original Continental GT, which was quite unique in the way it looked. I think the Flying Spur, similar, and all the aspects around it relate to that. I quite liked it. I think it gets away with it. Do you have a different opinion?
No. I was just intrigued to see what out in the real world what it looked like, because it is quite a feature, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I think
it looked like a big set of gates on the front.
Yeah,
There's that element to it, and obviously Rolls-Royce has been doing that
with the Pantheon grille. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not quite as imposing as the Phantom 8 grille, which feels bigger and kind of monolithic in its appearance.
Yeah.
It is. There's a lot of interesting grille designs out, and I think this is just part of that landscape. It's not too much, and as I say, being able to lower the Bentley emblem, which feels like the Bentley should have had as a feature for quite a while, but it's the first time they've done it. And it's like, where could they have got that idea from? I mean, just pull that out of thin air.
Literally no idea.
The funny thing is that I say it in the film, but it's worth highlighting. You get this controller where you can. It shows you a picture of the emblem, and you can control it going up and down, and it shows you it going up and down, which is good because from nowhere inside the car can you see the emblem. It's so far away from the driver's seat you can't even see it. It's so far and over the hump of the bonnet you just cannot see it. So you have to see on the display whether it's up or down. It's interesting. But yes, please go and watch the film. And if you would like to leave a comment that's not about my appearance, clothes, watches, or how I walk around places, it'd be highly appreciated. And I got to walk around the Formula One circuit as much as I could. George and I tried to walk a whole lap of it, but unfortunately the Monaco Yacht Show had been in town and they were taking up the stretch from the bottom of the tunnel.
The swimming pool complex.
So actually, no, it was from Tabac round to Rascasse.
Right.
So that whole section, we couldn't walk that section, so we then just went around the other way to Rascasse and then walked back up. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. I had a great time there.
Other films, E53.
Yes,
my long-termer, that one's up.
long-termer.
Yeah.
We've got quite a lot to talk about on long-termers because we've got a new one. But yes, you have a catch-up and more in-depth film.
Exactly. It's been used to it for ages, and it's the one about the drivetrain and all that, and sort of the hybrid element of it. So yeah, go and watch that. Probably not a lot else. I found another feature because there's I'm still discovering all this stuff in this car because there's so much to it. And we will do a film before it goes back, which I think is the end of December, sort of about all the tech in it and all the other bits and bobs. But interior lighting, I discovered how you could change all the colours and that and everything.
It takes a while to dig through.
I know, but it's just one of those, and it's a whole lot of childish pleasure when you find it. It's just I know it shouldn't. I know it shouldn't be, and I know it's not sort of core to why you buy a car or anything like that.
I use Philips Hue bulbs at home, and I just keep changing the colour of my front room. Yeah, I totally get that.
I think there's a strip that goes all the way around it, sort of, so it makes it look like a dodgy club, but it's still fun. And then the lovely air vents, which I'm a big fan of in the Merc, and you can get them to light up different colours. I suppose it's childish. But it's fun.
Hey, no,
I'm not
with you.
Sort of,
I'm with you.
It's kind of a guilty pleasure. So there we are.
But the latest film that we've published on it goes into a little bit more depth than the unboxing film that we previously had on it. So if you want to know more about that car, and we'll do a Your Questions Answered on it soon. We have Your Questions Answered film coming soon on the Kia Sportage, which I'm still loving. That's been my daily driver for the last couple of weeks, and I've been getting a lot of pleasure out of it. And you previously mentioned that it had a CVT, which it doesn't. Because you said it in the middle of a FtLoC, and I was like, oh. And then I was like, I didn't
Where
think.
did I hear that from then?
Because when you said that, I thought, I've been driving it for quite a while. How did I not notice it has a CVT? And it doesn't.
It just feels like it.
It's got a DCT. To be fair, because I was paying a lot of attention to it, just looking at it, it's a very close ratio box. So it never really dips that much, but it's got a DCT.
Well, there we go. I never said I was an expert on the Kia Sportage. So,
no, you did not. But when you said it, I was like, how did I not notice that? And I felt really bad. And then I realised that I wasn't wrong. But we have a new addition to the family, car-wise, that is. We have a new long-termer.
It's a Volvo.
Yes, it is a Volvo. We have a Volvo XC60, which we're very excited about. And we've just got in and we've just started running it in. It's come to us with factory miles on it, so we're still kind of running in. We spec'd it, me, Charlie and George. We spec'd it from the factory, which is why it took so long. Took about 3 months, I think, to arrive. But we picked all the options, so we'll have a film coming soon that runs through the entire option list that we added. Spoiler alert, we added everything.
It does look really good,
including mud flaps. Yeah,
it was at a shoot we did the other day with the Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato continuation up at Silverstone. Actually, you were saying that I was probably one of the few journalists to have driven the Singer and Workshop 5001 back to back, possibly the only one. As it turns out, I'm also the only journalist in the world to have driven DB4 GT continuation and DB4 GT Zagato continuation.
Ooh.
So I'm the only one that's driven both. Well, there you go.
That's we will probably go into more detail on that shoot in a future FtLoC, and the film will be coming soon. But keep an eye out for that, as well as extra film updates on the Mercedes and the Kia Sportage, and coming soon on the Volvo XC60, which, again, spoiler alert, is lovely.
Loaded.
It is loaded with tech, but it's also very lovely. Now, last time, 2 weeks ago, we had a fairly random addition at the end of FtLoC, and turns out you absolutely loved it. So we are going to continue with that now. Can we
get some theme music for this section of it?
Okay.
I'm not asking you to sing something. Don't sing. You could perhaps, in the edit, I don't know, put some music at this point, just sort of for the random rambles section.
Okay, here we go. It's FtLoC Random Rambles. I'm dancing to the music, which is coming soon. Which will include stuff that we have been using or will be using. And I've been offered a chance to try out a particular type of gaming monitor, which the plan is to hook that up to our racing seat and our racing wheel, and we'll plug in a PlayStation, and we want to see if this monitor could be the ultimate kind of gaming monitor that you might want to have at home. It's a 49-inch monitor, but don't think of it as in like a TV that would be 49 inches, which would be like wide and very tall. This is the same height as a regular monitor, but 49 inches wide. So it is the...
It's like a Hasselblad X-Pan of kind of that style.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes. So but as in a monitor in real time. So we haven't hooked up yet. We're going to hook up.
That's the size image of what I'm thinking about, that kind of long.
Yeah.
I love X-Pans.
Yeah.
I love X-Pan images. They're wonderful, aren't they? Or do you not?
I think there's an optimum width of an image.
And you think X-Pan goes too far?
I don't know, because I think it might. I've got a feeling that we haven't plugged this monitor in. We've got it in the office right now, and it's in a huge box. It's the equivalent of...
Oh, is that it there?
Yeah, that's a picture of it right there. And
it is proper X-Pan, isn't it?
Yeah. And it curves, so hopefully it will kind of fill your vision more. So we're going to hook that up and see if we can create like the ultimate home setup. It's not cheap. It's a £1,300 monitor, which is quite expensive. But if it looks great...
I don't know the price of monitors these days, but let's say,
yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I mean, it seems a lot of money to me, but then,
yeah, it's a resolution of 5,120 by 1,140, which if you're used to your monitor resolutions, even just from the numbers, will kind of give you a suggestion of how wide it is. So I'm really super excited about plugging that in. Last time we also talked about what books we were reading.
Yeah.
What book are you reading right now?
I am reading a biography of George Mallory.
Okay.
Who was famously lost on Everest,
trying
to climb to the top of Everest. The big question has always been, did he get to the top or didn't he? And there was the Mallory and Irving, and Irving had a camera, and the camera may or may not sort of... It doesn't really matter. It really shouldn't. Fascinating. It was my father gave it to me last Christmas, in fact, and it's been in my pile. It's my bed to read. And he's a fascinating chap, and sort of grew up or went to university with a lot of the Bloomsbury set, and in fact he was a master at Charterhouse, which is very close to where I grew up at home, lived in Godalming and that sort of thing. So and all sorts of climbing in Wales, around where we've done all sorts of testing of cars and sort of Penny Pass and Snowdon and all that sort of thing. So if you like mountaineering, which my father is very much an armchair mountaineer, and so I've long been interested in it, and a very small amount of climbing I've done. I love being in the mountains, and it's a fascinating book. Not dry as such, but it's not the sort of it's not fast paced, but it's interesting if you like that sort of thing. So that's what I am reading at the moment.
Okay, I'm halfway through the Beastie Boys book, which is which is on the other end of the non-fiction scale, written by Ad Rock and Mike D. Unfortunately, not with MCA, who passed away a few years ago. But I'm listening to the audiobook version, and some of it is read out by them, but then they've got celebrities to read out other parts, including like Will Ferrell's done a bunch, Jarvis Cocker's done a bunch, and
what would
it's
be
really great.
What the car equivalent of the books you just said? It would be like me going, this week I'm driving a 1920s Bentley. And you'd be driving...
I don't know, like an MX-5 or something. Something cheap and loud. But it's just got me back into listening to the Beastie Boys again, which has been really, really fun. There you go. Those are our 2 book recommendations of the week. But now, there was last week we suggested that we might want to talk a little bit about watches, that having a massive overlap with people who like cars. A lot of them like watches as well. If you don't, maybe now's the time to find something else to watch. But if you're interested, stick around. And one of the things that people were asking about were cheap watches. And we'll come to that in just a second. But I thought it might be nice to pick on, before we talked about that specifically, about one of the watches that you like to wear from your collection and from my collection. Collection might be a big word.
I was going to say collection is a big word. I've got 2. But
okay. I took count recently, and then it's a lot more than 2. But I don't think the entire total, there isn't ones as nice as you have. What are you wearing? I think on the watch channels they call it wrist check. So what's your wrist check?
This is a Bremont.
Yeah.
And it is a U2 slash 51 jet. So
keen viewers will have spotted that in quite a few videos that you've worn it. So what can you tell us about that? Because it is a handsome looking timepiece.
It is lovely. It's quite different actually to a lot of the Brembo watches. They do it's an automatic watch, and so they produce a lot of watches for the military, various descriptions, and this was produced for the U-2 pilots in the US, based out of Beale.
The spy plane.
Exactly. Yeah, which we talked a bit about last week with the Lockheed stuff. So that obviously caught my attention. I love the look of this. The 51.
Did we mention the U2? Because weren't we talking about the SR-71?
Yeah, but the U2, I think it briefly got a mention in the Skunk Works book that I was reading. So, anyway, so U2 is for that, and then the 51 is the P51 Lume, which is a vintage look. You can kind of see it's kind of not. I'm
a big Lume guy.
Yeah, so
I've got a UV Lume charger on my keyring.
Anyway, so that's the 51 bit, and the jet bit is because this was then it was off a project they did with 100 Squadron, which is the first night bombing squadron back in the days, and they ran the Hawk jet, and that's why it ended up with being black with the blue steel hands and stuff. And then they produce a lot of military ones which only the people in the military can buy, and then they do the various ones that are available to the public. So this is this version of that. And talking of which, so they also produce the Martin Baker watch, which has a rubberized mounting, which in fact this has too, to withstand the shock of being ejected. And I think it's the MB1.
Nice.
If you have actually ejected in a Martin Baker ejector seat, then you are able to buy one of those watches. As I remember, I wouldn't be able to buy it. You wouldn't be able to buy it, assuming you haven't ejected in a Martin Baker.
Not recently, no.
No. So exactly. So we couldn't buy one, but
but is it made to withstand being ejected, or is it just a reward for being ejected? Because surely, if it's built to withstand being ejected, then it seems academic to give it to someone who's already ejected.
Well, yeah.
That's literally closing the door after the horse is bolted.
Yes, I see what you mean there. Yes, but against having to do it again, there's probably some sort of research that if you've ejected once, your likelihood of having to eject again goes up or something like that. So I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, that's like an insurance claim.
Exactly. Yeah, it's sort of
I'm a big fan of military watches, or watches that have a connection to like military history. Yeah. Watches like Hamilton, Panerai, which is probably like if I had any amount of money to buy a watch right now, I'd be going out getting a Panerai who did the radio mirror. Again, as a big fan of Lume, the radio mirror was the first diver's watch to have Lume on it, and that has a whole nasty history behind that as well, because it was actually radioactive Lume, hence radio mirror. But that's a topic for another day.
And I wear this on a NATO strap because I like NATO straps. So.
Yes, I mean, honestly, straps is a whole other world of conversation. Again, that'll be a topic to come soon. I wore today
my... There's a good watch podcast called The Grey NATO, actually, isn't there?
The Grey NATO?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard that, but I will check it out. My watch I'm wearing today is my Casio Edifice. Edifice being like one of those...
Or Edifice, I thought it was pronounced.
Yeah, Henry yesterday, when we were talking about this,
heard that.
I says, you can bring your Edifice. I was like, crap, have I been saying it wrong all this time? I'm pretty sure it is Edifice. But if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. Casio, kind of like the kings of digital watches back in the day, and again, we'll come to that a little bit later, brought this kind of slightly sporty, slightly techie sub-brand out, also being the brand that also does the G-Shock sub-brand, so they're quite partial to a sub-brand. And I got this when I had a Seiko, which I'd had for years and loved, and then on a flight, my then infant son wanted something to play with, and I gave him my watch to play with, and he smashed it on an iron railing.
On a flight?
Yeah, he was in the bassinet, which had like a metal railing around the outside. So you hook it into the bulkhead, and he sits in there. He was less than one.
It's like flying on a Hercules or something like that.
No. And he just, it may not have been iron, but it was definitely metal. Yeah. And he flicked over and smashed it. So like, I'm going to buy myself a new watch. And this was the watch that I picked because it was the watch that Christian Horner was wearing at the time, because the Edifice brand was the main watch sponsor
of
like
the Spice Girls
Red Bull. I'm a huge Spice Girls fan. fan. Obviously Christian Horner is now married to Jerry Halliwell, which is that connection. If you weren't aware, that's not a random thing to bring up.
I'm sure people got it,
but
they wouldn't like to admit it, but I'm sure they did.
Probably did. So you'd watch the race on a Sunday and you see Christian Horner wearing this watch. I'm like, I want that watch.
Win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yes, but that usually means the car, not the watch so much. And I loved it. What I loved about it is that because I travel a lot, this is a Bluetooth watch that syncs to my phone. So when I change location, my watch changes with it, and it nails the time. So it's exactly right without me having to adjust it every time. And it's got complications for world time. So I set that to.
Does your other watch do that too?
Yes, my other watch does that too. Elephant in the room. I wear two watches. Yeah, because like the app. I might as well explain it here. The Apple Watch is great as a functional thing for like the health tracking stuff, and it's a whole bunch of other features for like notifications and all that kind of stuff. It is not an attractive watch. So I like to still wear a watch that I find attractive, but yeah, it does kind of undermine the fact that this is very good at telling the time when my other watch is equally good, if not better, at telling the time. But you touched on straps. I removed the bracelet, the metal bracelet that came, and I was until 2 days ago wearing this on a what some people call a Bond NATO, but is now kind of is the Bond NATO again.
With the stripes.
Yeah, so the Bond NATO refers to, I believe it's Goldfinger. Sean Connery wore a Rolex Submariner on a. People think it's a NATO. It wasn't actually a NATO. I think it was a Zulu strap. Again, very specific. But it was actually black, red, orange, and grey and green. But because of early VHS videotape not having great color representation, it looked like it was just black and grey.
Right.
So people thought that black and grey was the color. It wasn't until like HD stuff came out that people realized that he had a very ill-fitting. If you see if I can pull up a picture to put it right here, is the worst fitted watch strap you've ever seen. It's terrible. I wonder if I can.
Which is why now Omega, who obviously supply the Bond franchise, the one he now wears
is actually black and grey.
Yeah.
So and that's what I have, and then I wear one of my not a NATO, because you can't wear a NATO watch strap with an Apple Watch because it loops under the watch.
Right.
Interesting fact, do you know that the NATO watch strap, it's not named after NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which a lot of people think it is. It's not. NATO is actually, because it is a military connection, it was its part number, and it was a military watch strap, because if you've got the spring bar, which is the part that connects a watch strap, if one fails on a normal watch, your watch will fall off. But if you've got a NATO strap, one falls off, it won't. It will stay on your wrist. See that gap there? Yeah, it's like 2 mil off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. But you can see there, it's black, red, green, but in a poor representation, that just looks like black and grey. But coming to the main point of discussion, people wanted to talk about cheap watches. Affordable watches, I think, is a better way of describing it. And although I describe all of my watches as affordable, I have a particular penchant for ex-Soviet Union watches, which are very, very cheap and mostly reliable to pick up. I think it's interesting, worth exploring. And like, this was probably about $350, which is not nothing, but certainly not the most expensive watch by a long shot that you can pick up, a long shot. But you can get good watches for much, much less, and I regularly do. So I wanted to see what the cheapest watch is that you can get that still gets credibility. And it's been on screen the entire time. You've probably noticed it already. For me, going back to Casio, F91W, the most iconic, classic, basic digital watch you can get. And it's become it's been around since the 80s. And it is just as simple as you possibly can get. That cost me £8.
Yep.
And whenever I see someone with it, I always mention it to them. Because I'm a collector of watches. I've got about 15 watches, and I love all of them, but none of them are as good value as £8 for. And it's worth saying that you could spend £10,000 on a watch, and it won't be as accurate as a Casio battery-powered quartz watch.
Yep.
And so, if you like, the cheapest watch you can possibly get to still get credibility, in my mind, is that. Now there are others that if you want to spend a little bit more than £8, and we'll talk about that another time. But for me, I just wanted to bring up that you do not have to spend.
I remember
a fortune.
having one, and in fact, I wore that on a different strap as well. So it was a red and green animal when it did those Velcro straps for, had it on that for ages. Probably still got it somewhere. I'm sure I've still got it somewhere because I'm a hoarder like that, and I don't get rid of things.
You can get these in stainless steel. You can get them in like a gold finish. Yep. That is the most basic one, though, the cheapest one, and it to me that still has massive credibility. And what brand have you brought in?
It's another Casio.
It's a Casio.
Yeah. So this was so in a previous life when I was on film elsewhere. Yeah, doesn't pass and all that.
We don't mention that.
No. But this obviously for obvious reasons because it's red and red's my favourite colour and I rather liked it. And in fact, it was given to me by my mother-in-law. And people used to wonder what on earth it was. People always assumed it was a G-Shock, but it's not. It's I think 15, certainly under £20. This, and I loved it again. Very reliable.
It does actually.
Can
you put it on there a second? Because it does very much have that kind of G-Shock kind of shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the molded, the molded kind of resin exterior. I mean, to me, Casio just makes the most bulletproof, reliable watches. I'm a huge G-Shock fan. I've got 3, which is me being restrained. I'm a big fan. They've been going. The G-Shock brand has been going since 1983, so almost as long as we have, as human beings. But they make loads which are brilliant. And again, like the bold color and the extra complications in there. It's you do not have to spend a huge amount of money on a watch to get credibility from people who really like watches, because a real collector will just appreciate the watch for what it is, not how much money you've spent on it.
Do you think it's like cars to that extent? Which you said before
absolutely.
In terms of
it's absolutely like cars. Like if you've got a really great cheap car that you've looked after, that you get the most out of and you enjoy, you could spend the same on
somebody that owns Zonda would still look at it and go, oh, that's cool. You think...
Because they appreciate that for the same amount of money, you could have got a really boring car.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for like brand new car, £20,000, there's cars that you can get that's like the most anonymous, bland blob on 4 wheels, or you can get something with real character. And it is exactly like that. And for me, this is like, it's like I have a watch that I describe as the MX-5 of watches, the kind of like cheap but highly moddable, and that's the Seiko SKX 007, which for people who like to modify watches, that is like a pony car, that is almost designed to be taken apart and put back together. Right. And you can change the glass in it, you can change the face, the hand, the whole thing, and there's people dedicated to it. There's on Instagram or Pinterest is a really great place to see the stuff that people do to those watches.
Look it up.
And talk for hours just on the SKX 007. And you probably, like, if you've seen me wearing a Seiko watch in a film, it's probably been that one. In fact, until recently, it was on this strap. A Colareb strap. It was Italian leather strap, which I'm particularly partial to. But you're absolutely right. The comparison between cars, and I think that might be why there's such an overlap, is that you can spend ridiculous money on watches. Like in the Singer film, the track film, Marino is wearing the Singer watch, which... What's it, $50,000?
Something like that, I think, yes. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
They just released the London edition, which they were all I only know that because they were talking about it at the time. So, I mean,
to be fair, they're charging $500,000 for a car, so $50,000 for a watch doesn't seem that unreasonable. But you look at Richard Mille watches. Richard Mille's name's plastered over all kinds of motorsport cars, and they're charging upwards of $100,000 for some of their watches and more. And you're not, and if you spend a lot of money on a car, you'd expect, this is where they're slightly different, you'd expect that car to go a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Like, if you spend £100,000 on a car, I expect that car to perform better.
A Zonda does go faster than my Clio.
Yes. It's a lot of diminishing returns. It doesn't go 100 times faster.
No.
but it does perform better. You get more for it. Watches, once you spend more than £8, you do not get a watch that's more accurate.
That's probably got a stopwatch on it, isn't it?
It does,
So,
which most don't. If you ever want to delve deep into watch history, you can look up something called the Quartz Crisis, where there was a point at which Swiss watches were hyper accurate compared to normal watches, which would just be wound, and the watchmaker's craft was making ones that were the most reliable over time. And still to this day, mechanical watches get sold with how much they are likely to go fast or slow over a given period, maybe 1 second a day or 1.5 seconds a day, that kind of thing, which is relatively accurate for a mechanical watch. Then the quartz watches came along, which were hyper accurate, and all of a sudden, for a fraction of the cost, you can buy a watch. It's the equivalent of saying one day, oh, we found this new type of fuel, and if you put this fuel in an MX-5, it will go faster than a Veyron. And people go, well, why would I buy a Veyron then? Because I can go much faster in this MX-5. And so the bottom fell out of luxury watch market, and they then had to pivot towards being jewelry. That's why you can still spend ridiculous money on watches. Tourbillon is a mechanism which offsets gravity for the mechanics in a watch, which makes it slightly more accurate. Tourbillon watches, the amount of engineering that goes into making them is preposterous. Does it make it any more accurate than my phone? No. So, your phone is always going to be the more accurate way of checking time. Watches are the dumbest things now. They make no sense in a modern world, and I love them. They don't even they don't do anything that I don't already have 2 or 3 things on me that do it exactly the same.
But then we're back into whole manual gearboxes in a AMR Vantage.
Precisely. So we'll pick up a different watch topic next time. But in terms of cheap watches, you want cheap watches? I don't think you can get any cheaper than £8. The Casio F91W. It's not my favorite watch, but I've got 6 Casio watches in total.
Also sounds like a Williams F1 car.
It does a little bit. We'll go into a different watch topic next time, or if there's a specific one you'd like us to answer or delve into a little bit more in this back end of FtLoC, then be my guest. We've got to that point of FtLoC where we know the people who have stuck around are our biggest fans through thick and thin. So thank you. Thank you so much for making it this far into the episode and sticking with the channel. I know you're already subscribed, and I know you've already hit the bell icon to stay notified whenever we get a new film out, but it really means a lot to us that you've been with us. We were told off the back of last episode, which we started using these new mics, that people considered it to be almost ASMR.
And tell people what that means for people that don't like me, that don't know.
It's if you look up on YouTube, you'll find a whole variety of videos where people are doing things very close up to a mic because it has a soothing effect on certain people. Not me, if I'm absolutely honest. Let me check if I've got that abbreviation right. ASMR. It is ASMR.
Right.
And it's where people like really intimate sounds in their ears, and it's properly stereo balanced with nice microphones. And this is a nicely matched stereo pair of microphones that will hopefully have in a pleasing way in your ear. And if we do that to your ears, I'm very glad to say that we're happy to do so. I'm very grateful for each and every one of you who's made it this far. You are our greatest fans, and if you have made it all the way to the end, let us know on Twitter, which everyone else doesn't. It's kind of been our forgotten social media. But if you find us at Carfection on Twitter, let us know that you made it all the way to the end. And we'll make sure that we keep an eye on you because you're our real fans. If you want to encounter us in other forums, we are on social media at Henry Catchpole across the media.
Yep.
I am at Drew Stern. Stearne for Stern. And if you think I'm absolutely unmissable, you can actually find me in real world doing stand-up comedy, which is a new thing that I'm doing. You can find me at the Comedy Store in London on November 25th. That's some shameless self-promotion, isn't it?
Wow.
Absolutely. It's my channel. I'll do what I want. Yes, because I'm clearly so funny that I feel I need to share this with people in real time. I've started doing stand-up comedy, and I have a gig at the legendary Comedy Store.
That's very cool.
On November 25th, which I'm super excited about. And if I had extra support there, I would be very grateful. But unless there's anything else to add, I think it's time to say goodbye.
I think so.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. a lot of it is kind of semi-sexual.
Fair enough.
As in the people who listen to it get off on it.